Hello, this is Face to Face, Video Conversations, a program of the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs. I'm Kevin Cassidy from the International Labour Organization. Today we're going to be speaking about the issues of youth employment, employment in general globally, as well as what the United Nations and its partners are doing in order to address this problem. My first interview here, I'm with Sharon Burrow. Sharon Burrow is the General Secretary of the International Trade Union Confederation. Sharon, thank you very much for being here. Our second guest is Mr. Tan Sri Datu Azman Shah Harun, who is the President of the International Organization of Employers. Good morning. I'd like to start right away. Azam, I know that you're a businessman, and as a businessman, you're looking at these economic uncertainties, and they're still quite high, and you have to make plans for that. What are the businesses doing in their employment strategies to really increase hiring in the region?
Well, globally, countries need to develop a private sector and government sector dialogue sessions. I think in our country, Malaysia, we have already started that. And with dialogue forums that we have today, we are now trying to develop a bigger pie in the economic well-being of Malaysians. And I think globally, you need to do the same. We cannot talk in one group without the other. In other words, the workers and the employer community needs to have a real dialogue. And also government needs to play that role. Otherwise, you're talking about the old model. You can't continue to work based on what has happened in the past. And we have to move forward. Thank you.
In your area, I believe you're working in the hospitality sector with hotels.
Yes.
What specifically in Asia? I think that many of the economists have said that Asia had been fairly immune from some of the more severe downturns. Is that true? And what's happening actually in that sector?
It's true because I'm, as a country and as a company that operates within the Asia Pacific region and part of the ASEAN country, I've seen development non-stop, literally. I've been developing many hotels, particularly in China. And China is almost, a country that you cannot miss. You cannot not develop that country simply because they have a huge population to deal with. And the potential for growth in China is much bigger than anywhere else. And therefore, I think any entrepreneur, any group of business people needs to focus on where the growth is, particularly China.
And we're going to come back to that because I think that's a really important part of the global economy. Sharon, just speaking about youth unemployment, I mean, with the numbers of youth being discouraged and dropping out of the workforce, and we're really seeing a social crisis develop. I mean, in many areas, the people who are out on the streets who are starting to protest what they see as an unfair sort of economic environment. I mean, what do we have to do? I mean, and do we have to wait for comprehensive reform, or are there some steps that we can take right now?
Well, we first of all have to do what Azman just said, and that is recognise that what came before is not going to work. It's not working for people now, and it won't work into the future. And you heard today, just today, the President of Finland and Juan Samavia, the Director General of the ILO, say the current economic model needs to change. So we've got twin crises. We've got a crisis of ecology, of the very future of the planet in terms of environmental destruction, climate change, and we've got an unemployment crisis that is astronomical, with young people being increasingly at the centre of that as they're marginalised. So we need jobs, jobs and jobs. We need social protection to underpin jobs that are about decent work. And I must say, when you look at what we do better, not only do we have to create jobs, but we have to think about whether young people can actually live in the context in which they currently are working. In Asia, for example, while it's true that development goes ahead at a pace, we know that the minimum wages in most countries are not adequate for young people to live on with dignity, let alone raise a family. I just had a hearing in Indonesia, followed quickly on the heels of one in Mexico where the G20 just was. And young men and women say that even those earning twice the minimum wage are still struggling to pay their basic bills. So that's not good for demand. And it's backed up by a global poll that says only 11% of people feel that they're better off in terms of income. That means overwhelmingly, people, including young people, don't have the money to actually generate the demand to sustain businesses and therefore decent jobs. So the model needs to shift.
I think on that point, we hear political leaders saying how important the youth are. They're our future. They're our most important natural resource. I mean, what are the leaders doing? How do you rate the leaders today? Asman,
It
please.
depends on the countries, and I think countries that have leaders that are, very forward-looking, are doing the changes. Countries that are fighting amongst themselves, they're not doing any change. They're just fighting, and they should stop it and move on and create these new opportunities for people to grow. That's my personal opinion.
Sharon?
There are countries that are driving an inclusive growth model. They buck the trend. Countries like Brazil in particular, my own country, Australia, some of the Asian countries, but they actually have a dialogue which is about social inclusion with growth, with job-centred growth and protection of the vulnerable. But I must say, overwhelmingly, the model is damaged. And as you attack workers' rights, as you attack the very social protections that have made our economy stable, with social protecting acting as economic stabilisers, we are seeing a shrinking of demand, particularly in Europe, and an unstable economic sector that is not giving us any confidence for the future. We just came off, Kevin, 2 major summits, Rio +20 and Los Cabos, the G20. They made all the right noises, all the right texts are there, but there's no concrete, committed, coordinated action that would deal with the issues of the social protection floor in the poorest of countries. Where's the funding? The investment in infrastructure that the employers and workers recommended jointly, particularly enabling green infrastructure. Where's the dialogues, the coordination to bring all of our money, including workers' capital, to the table? Or indeed, what do we do about the informal economy where people are now desperate to survive, but it's withering sustainable businesses and decent work? So these are the dialogues we need to have. Asman's right about that. The employers and the unions, we believe, are up for it, but we need government leadership.
As the main sort of partners, the social partners of the ILO, we've just concluded our 101st International Labour Conference, and through that we've come out with this new document, this new call for action on youth employment crisis. Now, it gives good policy prescriptions. I think it provides some good guidelines for those who are meeting here today in ECOSOC. Is this just another nicely worded and sounding document, or is there some real substance to that? And Asman, if you can respond first, and then Sharon.
Okay, I agree with you. Sometimes we look at the past and we see a lot of talk and a lot of, by the way kind of statements. But I think the leadership is important. New leadership is in ILO, hopefully by next September. I think the new leadership needs to push this agenda forward, because you can't live in the past anymore. Everybody wants change. You cannot do change if you don't do something about it. You have to put your money where your mouth is, and push this a great issue that we have with the workers to move forward on. And you need strong leadership. You can't, waver, and you can't dilly-dally on this.
Sharon?
Well, the 2 discussions at the ILO this year are critical. Youth employment, absolutely. There is room for the dialogue that will generate the kind of upskilling, the scaling up of apprenticeships that the employers and the unions are agreed on as essential across all sectors, including female-dominated sectors, and we're willing to act together with governments and indeed by ourselves, as we'll meet in October globally, to discuss that. But equally, while we're putting people into the workforce, giving them the skills, we need to see the investment in jobs. And underpinning that, the social protection floor, the recommendation 202 that gives the multilateral system, gives government, the regulatory framework is critical. We must deliver that, but we've got to see the support of the multilateral agencies and countries look to actually supporting the development of the social protection floor, both for the dignity of survivability, but also for the basic level of demand to sustain businesses, to sustain jobs. It's affordable, but countries have to act to pool their aid funds to see an integrated strategy. So terrific discussions, absolute demonstration of what tripartite negotiation can do, but now we want to see action.
Right. So what is the cost of inaction?
Look, cost of inaction is frightening. We've just done a global poll with the Millennium Institute, as I said, and when only 13% of voters in those democracies think they have any serious influence over government decisions on economic and social futures, then that says the democracy contract, the confidence in our governance systems is broken. We can't have that. The recipe is social unrest, it's exclusion, and it's increased poverty and despair. That's not acceptable. I know it's not acceptable to the employers, and we need to act. We want governments to act with us.
Osman, can you answer that question? What
agree.
do you see from your perspective?
Our perspective is a disaster. If you don't create this job, the need to have more jobs, and jobs is the only way to go. And you have to prepare, the environment for this development of the jobs. It has to be new kind of jobs, the green jobs. The solar panels, the scientific community needs to explore these green jobs that will, develop new industries. That's an example that tourism is definitely one of them, which I'm involved, around the world. And I think you can easily create a lot of jobs if you do more tourism projects around the world.
In fact, we agree with that, Kevin. Can I tell you, our research in just 12 countries shows that 2% of GDP invested each year for 5 years would generate 48 million new jobs in just those 12 countries. Imagine what we could do collectively in 50 or 100 countries. It's possible. It needs political will and partnership.
Can I ask you just a little bit about China? You raised that a bit before.
Yeah.
Now, what are the prospects there? I mean, there's been the engine of growth there, and they've been pulling millions of people out of poverty.
Yeah.
Now we're starting to see a bit of a slowdown.
Yeah.
Maybe you can discuss that a bit. I mean, is it that China is slowing down, or the region around it is growing faster?
Their slowdown, Kevin, is from like 12% to about 8%. And the industry that I'm with, and that industry is really growing. I mean, the lack of hotels around China is incredible. And I don't see any problems getting, more hotels, management contracts, or what have you, in China. And I don't see this problem ahead of me in the next 10, 20 years, because the growth is phenomenal. They have got plenty of attractions, they've got plenty of people to visit these hotels and stay, and they've got a huge hunger for traveling within China. And you're talking about only the Chinese people. You haven't even opened it to the world.
In terms of that growth, what are the sort of skill sets that the youth today are going to need? Not only just the policies set in place, for moving in certain directions, but the youth themselves sometimes wonder, what is being done for me? I mean, what is your message back to the youth themselves? Maybe Sharon, if you can answer that first.
Well, on the question of China's development, Asman's right. But you have to look at what they're doing to drive this. They're actually driving up minimum wages. In some places 38% in the last 12 months alone. They're driving collective bargaining, immature, but nevertheless developing rapidly. They're driving investment in infrastructure and green technology. They're leading the green economy in terms of the percentage of investment and output of any of the nations globally. And of course, what we know that China can do, it can't lead the world on its own out of the global economy. But what it can do is show that it's prepared to come into the 21st century with rights, with investment, with support for the poorest. And so social welfare there is being also rolled out, social protection, at a rate of knots. So there are some good stories here.
Fantastic. We're going to be wrapping up, and this time seems to go by so quickly, and I have so many other questions to ask, but maybe, Azam, if you can just give me, just your picture of the next 2 years. What do you see ahead for the economy, particularly in the Asia region?
I think it's like peace. Everybody agrees we must have peace. But how do we go there? That's the debate that's going around in the world today. And I fear that is where we are, is the direction that we want. What's happening in Europe today is of big concern to everybody around the globe. And I feel that unless you resolve some of these political and economic issues that you need to resolve quickly, you're not going to move on. That's my fear.
I just see increasing inequity. Unless you actually have the support, as Asman said, for the real economy, for the actors in the real economy, employers and employees, that is not in evidence with the speculative continuation of the speculative adventurism in Europe, the lack of coordinated capacity. No government, no country can act alone now, right now, if they want a global economy that's stable. And yet we're still seeing vested interests put ahead every time of individuals, and particularly of our young people.
Well, Sharon and Azam, thank you very much for joining me today. I'm very encouraged by your words. Knowing that you're working together makes me a bit more comfortable, knowing that we'll hopefully achieve that goal. Right now, we're going to take a little short video break, but please stay tuned and we'll be back very shortly. Thank you.